Assalamu everyone. Welcome to another episode of Be Well, where we interview a variety of experts in the space of mental health. I'm Monique Tui, your host, and this is an initiative from the Centre for Muslim Wellbeing. This interview is conducted on Wurundjeri land. Let me start by paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. In this episode, we're going to be talking with a very old friend of mine and favourite person in the world, clinical and forensic psychologist Hanan Dover. Let me tell you a little bit about Hanan. She's completed 4 degrees. She's an absolute serial learner. She's a maven. That's what they call people who love learning for the sake of learning. And if she could, she'd be at uni forever and read every book in the world, but she's way too busy doing lots of things in our community. She is a clinical and forensic psychologist with special interests in trauma, mood, and anxiety-related disorders, sexual difficulties in relationships, complex clinical presentations, chronic pain, psychopathology. She's a special interest in deception, as in picking out when people can lie, parenting, autism spectrum disorders, and challenging behaviours. She's also a certified EMDR practitioner and can conduct neurofeedback and clinical hypnotherapies. As a forensic psychologist, Hanan conducts forensic psychological assessments and writes reports relevant for court, which is dealing with really complex cases. Hanan maintains that she is multilingual because she speaks Arabic as well as a language of coffee lovers. Well, welcome, you're speaking to another coffee lover, you know that. So welcome, Hanan, to an episode of Be Well.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me, Monique. It's great to have catch up after the last few years, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, I can't wait to pry your brain open, right? And contain that brain. I don't know how we're going to contain this episode to like 45 minutes, Hanan, but let's see how we go. You are known as, I think best known as a psychologist in the Muslim community and broadly, mum, entrepreneur, you're a massive businesswoman, successful businesswoman, mashallah, and activist in the community on a range of issues you are hugely passionate about. For as long as I've known you, you've been all for, okay? But I would like to know, what are you less well known for?
That would be quite tricky because I'm a very open book, and a lot of people know a lot about me, especially within what I do say in social media. And I think a lot of people may not know that I'm neurodivergent, so I've got autism and ADHD. And I suppose another area people don't know is I like cricket. I enjoy the cricket. I grew up in Australia, and in the summer, my parents were very conservative. We didn't go out much except to the beach on the weekends. So on TV, you had a choice between watching the tennis or the cricket. So I chose cricket. So yeah, I do enjoy it until now. So when I do get some spare time, or if I can go to a match, I do enjoy a bit of cricket.
Well, my family was opposite. They went down the tennis route, and cricket is a swear word in our family, just letting you know. It's not something we're passionate about, but lovely to hear that. Yeah. Do you get to any cricket games?
Yes, I went last year. It was a World Cup final in Sydney. It was Pakistan versus New Zealand. So that was the last game I attended. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So look out for Hanan in the audience, basically, at the next big match, right?
I do cheer hard too. Yeah.
Now, what you are most known for is being an awesome psychologist. So what did your parents say when you first told them that you wanted to study psychology back in the day?
I think they shared the same views as the community and the stigma associated with mental health. So to them was like, oh, you're going to be going into area and you're going to be treating crazy people. I mean, they didn't mean it in an offensive way, but that's the way they understood psychology and psychiatry, often fusing both meaning the same thing. So that was their initial thoughts. However, my parents were very supportive. They gave me autonomy to be able to study and have further interests in areas that I loved. So that was a good thing. And I think that in essence, also the community, when they found out I was studying psychology, there was a lot of stigma around why are you studying psychology? Psychology is all about Freud, sex and aggression. That's how they reduced psychology. Yeah. So I remember the only way I could talk to our community about the relevance and importance of studying psychology, because there wasn't anyone studying psychology at the time in our community, it was a new thing, was to come up with a good one-liner, and it worked every single time. And I said, okay, well, if there's something wrong with secular and Western psychology, then it's my jihad, so my intellectual jihad to fix it. Then like, okay, that's good. Yeah. So they were all for it. And subhanAllah, those who questioned my studies in psychology end up needing my help later on when I became a psychologist. So that was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar experience, but I got told studying psychology was haram. And because I was newly Muslim, as well as studying psychology, I had to push back on that a little bit to go, but there are no Muslim psychologists in the community. Doesn't the community need Muslim psychologists?
Yes.
And then I got yeses. And same thing, the very similar people that said that to me then became my strongest referrers.
Yes. So it's a great journey. It's really a good journey. And I think that having that level of skepticism by the community just motivated me, to ensure, that we did well in the area. And because we know it's very important for the Muslim community to be equipped with mental health literacy. So the fact that, we're pursued and soldiered on or jihaded on, paid off in the end. So alhamdulillah. Yeah.
Just cause.
Yeah, that's right.
Cause, right.
That's right.
You have been hugely active in the Muslim and broader Australian community for like over 30 years. And I had to guess there, right? As in we've known each other for almost that. But I'm assuming you were more active even when you were a teenager, because I just know who you are. You're the founder of Mission of Hope, Psych Central, which is one of the largest psychology clinics in Australia. Is it the largest?
Not in Australia. I think within Western Sydney, we are the largest. Or if you look at, the largest psychology clinic in terms of the number of psychologists of Muslim faith, yes, Psych Central has many Muslim psychologists working here.
Yeah, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
You have been absolutely instrumental in building mental health and psychology literacy across the Australian Muslim landscape, and probably beyond too, New Zealand and some other countries you've worked in. What has challenged or excited you the most about working in the space of Muslim mental health?
And I think working in the field of Muslim mental health has been both, I have to say, challenging and exciting. And one of the most significant challenges has been addressing the stigma. And I'm sure it's the same for you, surrounding mental health within the Muslim community. Many individuals, they hesitate to seek help when I started becoming a psychologist or practicing as a psychologist due to the cultural religious misconceptions about mental illness. So it's been an ongoing effort to break down these barriers and promote mental health literacy amongst Muslims. I remember running community programs about mental health, presenting them in a very down-to-earth, easy way so that the information can be absorbed and to connect them in a synergistic way with Islamic scripture. So it's meaningful from a narrative perspective. So it's in line with their thinking as well. And on the exciting side, I've witnessed a growth of awareness and willingness to address mental health issues within our community. So that excitement comes from seeing individuals, families, and community leaders also. They're increasingly open to discussing mental health, as we've seen, and seeking therapy, supporting initiatives to improve the mental well-being amongst Muslims.
Absolutely. There's been that flow-on effect, hasn't there, from seminars and workshops that you have run for a very, very long time, and then encouraging other psychologists as well and supervising other psychologists under you to do the same thing, to take it out to respective diverse communities too, and well beyond, and in other language groups too, and different cohorts of the Muslim community, because we're not all this one thing, right?
Yeah.
And you've got, groups of the elderly or young people, and all of that information and mental health literacy has had to be changed depending on the audience so that it's been relevant and culturally safe.
That's right. And I think in addition, and we share these experiences, is we've also had to educate and inform mainstream mental health service providers or health organizations in order for them to understand how Muslims see mental health as well, because we were equipping Muslims to be open to understanding mental health and seeking mental health support, but then that needs to be met with educating mainstream service providers so they know how to best serve the Muslim community as well. So it was a two-way street.
Absolutely, right. Because unrealistic to think that the Muslim community, as much as it can and is providing so many resources in the space of psychological services, but to think that we can do it all is probably irrational and actually unfair, because what's unjust about it is to not expect a system to cater more effectively to the community it's setting out to serve, and to really send that strong message that mental health service provision is not a one size fits all.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. And we've got a lot of now, we've got a lot of mental health health workers who are Muslim, who also work in mainstream. So, you know, we've grown from where we were over 20 years ago. So it is exciting times at the moment.
Absolutely. So we've had a little bit of a cast back to what that transition and the journey of our community has been in the space of mental health. Let's go forward for a moment. What do you see as the main social challenges facing the Australian Muslim communities over the next 10 years, for example?
Okay, so if we're looking at over the next decade, I think that we will face several social challenges, and some which may include, I mean, even though it existed 20 years ago, it's the same today, because we've got an influx of refugees and migrant communities settling in Australia. So the integration and identity issues. So being able to balance the religious identities while integrating into the Australian society can be a challenge for many Muslims, because you've got the intergenerational gap between the parents and the children. So finding that balance is actually quite important, in the same way that it was for myself growing up, being a second generation Muslim. And then you've got Islamophobia. So addressing and combating Islamophobia remains a significant challenge, you know, and that's been a challenge since September 11, and it continues till today, with a lot of international events as well that affect us here, and that can also impact mental health and well-being of Muslim individuals and communities. So we've got to be on top of that within our community, and build culture, build capacity to be able to assist in that particular area. Like, for example, supporting the Islamophobia Register Australia, who are doing excellent work in that space. You know, so us as mental health professionals need to be able to support them in their excellent work. And then you've got obviously the mental health challenges. So the continued efforts to reduce stigma around mental health, because they still exist, and improve the access to culturally sensitive mental health services will be crucial. And that's not only looking at increasing the education around mental health in terms of having mental health professionals, but also resourcing our community leaders, resourcing our Muslim organizations, so that they do have the mental health literacy in that area. So, for example, if you look at Educate at the moment, you know, they're doing a lot of great mental health literacy programs, you know, educating community leaders and organizations and schools in that particular space. And that's headed by, you know, Muslims. So this is our growth in the community has been great in the last 20 years. And then obviously education, so ensuring quality education and opportunities for young Muslims to excel in various fields, that's a social challenge. While maintaining their cultural and religious identities is important, especially in the face, coming back again to Islamophobia. And then also the social inclusion, I would say, is a significant challenge. So promoting social inclusion and diversity within Australia is essential. And that's to continue trying to create. We're very good at it in Australia compared to other countries around the world, I must admit, but more work needs to be done to maintain cultural and religious identities, and to work more cohesively and harmoniously in a multicultural environment. I mean, in the area of psychology, Australia is very open to having different interest groups in psychology and mental health. You know, they're not antagonistic to looking at different refugee cultural communities, identities, languages, you know, as it relates. They don't shy away even from spirituality, mental health. So in Australia, it's compared to other Western countries, we do a great job, I would say. More can be done, just like in every area, but Australia is a good space for that. Even from a mental health perspective, mainstream, we're big on mental health, and so is the government. You know, so we need to be able to capitalize on the resources that are given to us to best serve our community within those resources and that are provided.
I think that's a really good way to capture also the last 20 years of some of those main themes that people, firstly, we didn't have many resources, right? So 20 years ago, there weren't that many people qualified to deliver services. But this understanding that the community isn't getting smaller, the community will continue to slowly get bigger and bigger, and the population will continue to diversify. So therefore, the resources in it need to diversify and grow and expand as well, which then leads you to also start to think about putting the responsibility of mental health and well-being, not just on psychologists like you and me, but also other community members who are in positions where they lead groups, lead huppahs, and to start to embed well-being principles or mental health awareness in many other spaces, classrooms, Saturday schools, and for other people to step up and take responsibility. The positive thing that I see, though, is people actually putting their hand up to want to learn. Lots of people being trained in mental health first aid. CMW runs a lot of those courses. They're doing really well because people are just so interested in the area and want to feel personally equipped that they could help another community member in need, which is amazing. And if some of those repetitive themes like Islamophobia that unfortunately aren't just going to disappear in 10 years' time, they will be there. And for, I think, practitioners and organizations to really think about, well, what does this look like in 5 or 10 years' time, and what resources need to be there? So you're minimizing the harm caused by essentially a very large dynamic that the community doesn't have much impact over. They're just impacted by.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, these challenges, they're complex, but they're also interconnected, and it requires a comprehensive and collaborative approach within our community members. So not just mental health professionals, but also religious leaders, community leaders, organizations, but also mainstream organizations. So it requires a holistic approach. And, we are progressing on that trajectory of change. And that's the only way we're going to be able to address these issues effectively. So that we can live in a more inclusive, equitable, and spiritually, mentally healthier future for our community. So building that cultural and religious capacity, and as it can be integrated within the wider Australian community is actually very important.
Yeah. And on that notion of psychological services, and in fact, tertiary education of psychologists not being a one-size-fits-all, you have recently authored a curriculum and a lecturing in the Graduate Certificate of Islamic Psychology offered at Charles Sturt University. Can you tell us a little bit about that course? And I'm just curious to know, what did you decide out of everything was important to include in a course like that?
Okay, that's a very good question. Interesting as well. And let me start by telling you how I came up with the idea. I needed some self-care. I went to Bali for a week, and just to get away from work and so forth. And I had booked a 3-hour massage, and at the time, as I was thinking, okay, what can I do that's something unique and different? Because I'm always thinking about projects and how to help my community. I feel as if I'm married to our Muslim community, and I love psychology. And having autism, my fixated interest is mental health and psychology, which I'm lucky because I've built courses, institutions, clinics around something that piques my interest all the time. So I had contacted the directors of ISRA at the time via email. So before this 3-hour massage, I was like, okay, I'm going to send them an email and said, okay, hey, what do you think of developing a course since you teach Islamic studies, and it's at CSU? Do you think it's ever going to be realistically possible to put together a graduate certificate in Islamic psychology? Had my 3-hour massage, opened my email later when I went home, and they said, let's do this. So they were very excited, actually. I had not expected such a warm response. And then even the university itself. So obviously Charles Sturt University, we had to put all the paperwork together. The School of Psychology, actually, even though it's not under the School of Psychology, but Islamic Studies, actually believed that the subjects were very good, especially given it had an applied subject. So I suppose when I put it together, I wanted to be able to have 4 subjects. So the introduction to Islamic psychology, and that subject will introduce the students about the context definitions, the framework and perspectives about human nature from an Islamic perspective. So you need to, and also talking about the classical scholars and their contributions in Islamic psychology, for example, Ibn Rushd, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Balkhi, and so forth, but then I needed to be able to make sure that the students in the class understand, mainstream secular psychology, Western psychology. So we had a subject on human behavior and experience, where it looks at the fundamental subdisciplines and theories of modern psychology, but we also critically evaluate it from Islamic perspective as well. So we're looking at health, behavioral, cognitive psychology, and so forth. And then the essentials of Islamic spirituality. So they already were teaching a subject on Islamic spirituality. And I remember 2 years before, I sat in all the classes, and I thought the course was brilliant because it looked at, the nafs and how that's important in human development, and ihsan, spiritual excellence. So I wanted to keep that existing subject in the course. Then obviously the applied course is the unique part, because I don't think there are, even though there are different Islamic psychology courses around the world, what makes this one unique is the applied, because this is where you bring all that knowledge that you've studied during the semester in an applied sense, where we cover counseling interventions from various mental health conditions using principles of Islamic psychology. So we utilize the current theories, research, and culturally competent practices in the delivery of the counseling intervention. And we use essentially prophetic principles in giving nasiha, and also its application. And Nasiha Consulting is the name of your business, so you understand the importance of Nasiha as well. And looking at Islamic value systems and mental health are explored, and it's actually an applied where they actually engage in counseling interventions in that subject. So it is quite an exciting subject, and I developed it according to where we're going in Islamic psychology. But make it practical, because not everybody who does the course is in psychology.
Yeah. So people are, I thought about that too, right? As in you might get non-clinicians or non-practitioners in there because they just would like to have their head across the contributions of scholars and the principles of the human nature from an Islamic point of view, and just to understand that for their own personal self-development, and other mavens that are probably joining the course with you. But it brings me to this next question, which I think is off the back of that applied unit, is, in practical terms, how might an Islamic psychological perspective influence a therapist's approach in therapy, maybe giving nasiha or maybe something else?
Yeah. I suppose what we look at is the Islamic psychological perspective, and look at it, how can they deliver the Islamic information and the current psychological theories that we do have today, and the methods of our practice, and make it meaningful for Muslims. So obviously, to make it meaningful, one of the things that differs, Islamic psychology differs from Western psychology, is the spirituality. So for a therapist, or even if you're not a therapist and you're doing this course, it's the spiritual integration, because we've got lawyers, community leaders, those who head volunteering organizations within the Muslim community, chaplains, teachers who actually enroll in this course, so spiritual integration is important, so because it integrates the spirituality in your nasiha or into the therapy. And this may help clients explore their spiritual beliefs, which is important, which is part of the Muslim narrative, right? Which is part of our being, the practices and their impact on our mental health. So, and this approach provides clients or the people that we're serving or helping to have a deeper sense of meaning and purpose, because Islam is a very deep religion. We're asked to reflect and contemplate. So, and also the cultural sensitivity, which is very important in our area. So we task them with getting them to consider their cultural and religious backgrounds and their level of faith when they come to therapy, and to be compassionate and non-judgmental as well. So adapt the therapy to align with their values and beliefs. And so this promotes trust and rapport between the therapist and the client, and it also enhances the therapeutic relationship, which, in our area, our success of therapy is usually the relationship, our connection with our clients, more than the information itself that we deliver. importantly, the ethical considerations. So in this course, we look at the Islamic ethics and principles that guide us when giving nasiha or therapy. And you notice I'm saying nasiha or therapy because not everyone who does the course is a therapist.
Yeah.
And I emphasize this to them a lot in the course, so they take from it what they can within the level of expertise, not go beyond. There's no diagnosing in this course, and so look at it in addressing also moral dilemmas and ethical issues to do with giving nasiha or therapy. So they navigate these ethical challenges while adhering to Islamic values where appropriate. And then obviously it has also a community and family focus because Islam is about ummah, it's about social connection and family values as well. So it extends beyond the individuals because Western psychology is a lot to do with one-on-one individual therapy. We are very inclusive of the family and community in therapy, to include family and community dynamics. So we use the course to help them and encourage them to use the support systems and emphasize the importance of collective well-being. Okay, and we know from research actually the most profound and best buffer to mental health issues or treating mental health issues is your social networks, is that social connection, and then obviously the holistic approach. We teach them and advise, how to holistically recognize the interconnectedness of the mind, body, and the spirit collectively, and to incorporate practices such as dhikr, and salah into the therapy to promote well-being, and acts of worship, and giving in charity, being nice to your neighbor, and so forth. So overall, the Islamic psychological perspective, it enriches or enhances the nasiha therapy by addressing the spiritual, the moral dimensions of the client's life, very holistic, and it fosters cultural sensitivity in terms of mental health. So it's comprehensive in that way because Islam is all encompassing. Okay, and of course, it's not like where we get current modern psychology and just add Quran and Sunnah. It actually starts from the premise, the foundation of Quran and Sunnah, and then we'll build on that. That's what makes it Islamic psychology. So it's not a superficial course. It's grounded within Islamic human nature. Okay, and then we build on the topics and areas accordingly. And obviously we value and adhere to also evidence-based practice. That's very important.
It sounds like actually a course that would be fabulous for people who are not Muslim, as in non-Muslim practitioners, to also attend a really deep and meaningful, course to actually help non-Muslim practitioners to achieve cultural safety with Muslim clients by going in and looking at, okay, what do many Muslims believe, or what might they value and benefit from by being able to bring in spirituality into therapy. Said no Masters of Psychology course ever. When you think about it, it's in how to be formally trained how to bring spirituality into the therapeutic context is actually incredibly rare. So that offering of the course is really quite unique. So really well done, mashallah.
I'm actually
doing that. I can't think of, there are no master's courses in Australia that incorporate that in a meaningful and significant way without touching on it tokenistically that your clients might have faith.
That's true. This is not a master's course, although in the future we want to build on that. It's a graduate certificate. And I must say, that I'm pleasantly surprised, this went through the university, and it's a testament to the inclusiveness of Australian universities as well. And it's accredited by a university. And I do, at a spiritual level, believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this to happen, because I wasn't expecting this idea, because I have a lot of ideas, and they don't all come to fruition, but this one did, and I'm very careful to make sure that we do justice to it, because at the end of the day, we're answerable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our community as well, we are blessed, in Australia to be able to have such a course. And the students actually are also from around the world. It's not only Australian students. We've got students from the US, from Singapore, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from Jordan, so we do have international students as well. And also non-Muslim students have also enrolled in some of the subjects of the course, because they do want to understand Muslim communities, because they work with Muslims. So we're very proud of the course itself, and I do hope it grows. And inshallah, people are able to make good. And, you know, not to give myself a pat on the back or the hijab, although I would, you know, even the anonymous feedback that we get about the course through Chaso University, it's actually one of the highest positive evaluations actually amongst all the courses at the university on the subjects. So and so for us, it's also indirectly dawah as well. So when we actually have an Islamic course, you know, and it's received very well, you know, and it's run by Muslims, headed by Muslims, you know, it's also a form of dawah in and of itself. So I think that this course, like, I'm still in awe that we've actually just finished year 2. We're going into year 3 next year, inshallah, and we welcome everybody to enroll in the course, because the course, even though you're not using it for work, I always say that the benefit of the course is that it's self-transformative. You know, you will find a lot in that course that will benefit you as an individual personally, you know, because Islamic psychology is all about human nature, you know, and we know that in our scriptures, you know, and our understandings, to know yourself is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you know yourself, the more you'll be able to understand and love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen more. So and I think that there are extended benefits in just running a course in the delivery of this course. So I'm very proud of this and the team that works, like with Dr. Associate Professor Zaleha. She's wonderful. So I'm really thankful, and I just hope that the community really does benefit. And there's a lot of, as you know, other Islamic psychology courses around the world. So it's actually great to see, you know, but it's just great. And this is where I will hold the pom-poms for Australia. You know, Australia is, you know, the first country to have an accredited university course in Islamic psychology. So we should be proud of ourselves in having that milestone. Who would have thought, when I first met Professor Malik Badri back in 1996, you know, and he inspired me, you know, I wish he was alive today and to see this. He would have been so proud of me. So yeah, so it's really nice, you know. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. You should be proud of yourself, and alhamdulillah that this was one of those things that have come through. It was qadar Allah, and to come through your hands and the team's hands too. And yes, Professor Malik Badri would have been very proud of you, I know.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. You know,
he would have been really pleased. And you know what? He wouldn't have been surprised, Hanan, that you did this.
Yeah, it's true. I'm smiling. I just remembered when I was giving a keynote address, which he chose me for to present, you know, so he was introducing me, you know, and I know this word has, you know, the wrong connotations understood by non-Muslims and so forth, but, you know, you've got to understand this in context and its appropriate definition. But he introduced me as the jihadi psychologist, you know, because I was seen as a rebel within the, even within Islamic psychology peers and whatnot, and he knew I was determined to make a difference, you know. So so I like the fact he gave me like a nickname in the area, but yeah, so he would have been. So alhamdulillah, and I do believe all our efforts, you know, collectively in mental health is a form of intellectual and spiritual jihad. Yeah,
inshallah. On that, this is it's a really interesting emerging area, right? And really not starting with, but in terms of modern day Islamic psychology, Professor Malik Badri made such a large contribution to even being present around in our era to talk to us about what it was and introduce us to some of those primary concepts. But I'm wondering now, there's so much more research that needs to be done. You know, I know we both got research you know, interest areas. And when I was first at university, I used to type Muslims and depression in all these databases to see if anything would come up, anything at all, you know, or Muslims and panic disorder, Muslims and marital therapy, Muslims and whatever, and to see if anything would come up. And yet what has sort of disheartened me over the years is hearing that at times Muslim students are discouraged from studying, you know, of doing their thesis, undergrad, graduate diploma, or, you know, even at a master's or a PhD level on topics that are relevant to the Muslim community and that would really benefit the Muslim community, even as far as Islamic psychology.
I think
Okay.
the reason for that would be because there isn't a lot of supervisors who are experts in psychology of religion. But I remember I was fortunate at Western Sydney University. We had one of the very few experts in psychology of religion at the university, and she supervised 3 of my 4 theses. So I was and all my research was to do with Muslim populations, and I had published. So I was very fortunate being at the right university at the right time. I do believe I've been blessed, in my journey in the area of psychology. But it's true, there wasn't a lot of research, and I wanted to contribute, which is why I chose Muslim populations. But in essence, also the inclusion of Islamic psychology. And there could be areas that Muslims, if they're listening, that they can actually explore in terms of research, looking at stigma reduction, the effect, investigate the effective strategies for reducing mental health stigma within our communities. Looking at cultural adaptation is very important. So explore how psychological interventions can be culturally adaptive to serve Muslims, because we know in our practice it works, but we don't have the research, to back this up. So this is why, we have to be producers of knowledge, as Professor Rasul says. Instead of being consumers of knowledge, us Muslims would need to also be producers of knowledge. So we need to investigate the efficacy of the culturally tailored programs, that impact cultural competence and also therapeutic outcomes, because we do it, but, we need to do research. Importantly, because we know this works as well, is looking at religious coping mechanisms. We should research this, look and examine the role of religious coping in improving mental health outcomes for Muslims. So investigating how Iman, our Salah, and religious practices influence resilience and psychological well-being. And there are mainstream research in this particular area, but who better equipped than us, who understand our faith and our scriptures, and we know our culture and our narratives, and to do research on this particular area, looking at community-based interventions, cross-cultural comparisons as well. Compare and contrast mental health experiences across different Muslim majority countries or cultural contexts. And obviously we can also research ethical dilemmas, so to investigate the ethical dilemmas that therapists may encounter when working within Islamic psychology. So there's a lot that can be researched, and there's a lot of writing on Islamic psychology. In my time, like you said, when you were Googling you were looking at research databases, Muslim and depression and Muslim and marital therapy and panic disorder. I remember Googling Islam and psychology, Islamic psychology over and over, not much material, even books in English, and I would wait, until something was translated in English, spend and save up so much money to buy that book. Now everything's given to students on a silver platter, but I appreciate my journey. I do appreciate, because I struggled really, because I was waiting for information. And I'm very open about this as well. I'm almost self-taught in Islamic psychology. I did go to classes, did do courses, did do Islamic courses as well, but I did a lot of deep reflection and reading in this particular area. But now you've got courses, and even if they're not diplomas or university courses, there are different types of online, or organizational delivered Islamic psychology mental health courses that you can do. You don't have the same struggles we did, so because my Arabic literacy is not very strong, or Persian, a lot of literatures in Persian, for example, or in Urdu, so or Indonesian as well. Indonesia's big on Islamic psychology. So
that's what excites me about how our community, as in an Australian community, and the psychologists in it are diversifying. Okay. Alhamdulillah, finally. Right. As in we're getting psychologists pop up from all different communities, because we actually need access to traditional texts that haven't been translated on Islamic psychology. Beyond my scope as an English speaker only to do that. It's just waiting for people to pop up in different parts of the world to go, and there's this book and that book and that book and that book and this translation, and for people to bring that to life, that starts to actually be a collection, and starts to form literature reviews for future research. And we as practitioners want to ascribe from an ethical and from an ethical point of view, that we want to be utilizing evidence-based practices.
That's exactly right.
But we're almost ahead of doing things and trialing an error and trialing an error, and now we need other people to come and do the research of things that have been trialed. Okay, to then be able to call it evidence-based, not just we're going to use what works,
That's
but
right.
we're so busy in the practitioner phase, as in you want to encourage other up and comers who need an idea for their thesis or their PhD work or some other piece of work to come into areas where there's deficits. So you might type Islam and psychopathology and 3 articles come up. I'm sure a lot more come up now, but
Yeah.
and to go, well, there's nothing there and there's an opportunity for me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to fill the gaps. Yeah.
100%, and sometimes even Islamic psychology material is not found in like Islamic psychology textbooks. So I remember, I was one of the texts I was waiting to be translated, and I had to wait a long time to get it received. I had to save up a lot of money for it. I remember Abdul Hakim Murad, so TJ Winters, he was translating one of Imam al-Ghazali's volumes on the breaking of the 2 desires. And I think I spent $150. It was a lot of money back, like over 20 years ago, to get the book. It was very expensive. But when I was reading it, it was reference, because we're used to reference, at the academic level, and a lot of the text on Imam al-Ghazali was not reference that you can find at an Islamic bookstore. I knew his would be something special, and it definitely was something special. Now, that's not an Islamic psychology textbook, but it had very important knowledge for the area of Islamic psychology, that I could actually utilize in my understanding in the area. So we're far more, all the students now, even us who are seasoned psychologists or in the area of Islamic psychology, we're very blessed with a lot of published information in this particular area. So we just need to grow and help it flourish, because, if you look at Buddhism and psychology, it's almost mainstream now. There's no reason why we can't excel as a community, with some of our concepts become mainstream language, as well, because we've got a lot to contribute. Especially, yes, we're a religious institution, but there's a lot in terms of the spiritual awareness and information in Islamic psychology, that can really help serve other communities, besides, everybody knowing the word, jihad in a negative light. There's a lot of Islamic psychology concepts we can make very mainstream. Even the word jihad itself, in a struggle, it's a beautiful concept. It's got multiple meanings, and I don't want to dilute, the major ones, but in a struggle is one of them. So we need to be able to, as Muslims, talk about our concepts to make it more mainstream, to benefit, because our purpose in this dunya, is to spread awareness about the deen and serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is part and parcel of our responsibility, our collective responsibility, almost like a fard kifaya, so to speak. Yeah,
Absolutely. So if people are out there and they're listening and they would like to know more in the area of Islamic psychology, or be linked up to one of the networks on, perhaps International Association of Muslim Psychologists, who would you recommend that people get linked up to so that they can access more information in the area of Islamic psychology?
If internationally, there are multiple organizations. So, for example, I'm the vice president and the first female, in the executive and the board. So that's profound, and I think that's why Professor Malik Badri called me jihadi psychologist as well, because I said it's a men's club. We need more women. And so he agreed, actually, and mashallah, he diversified the organization. And that's the International Association of Muslim Psychologists, and then you've got the International Association of Islamic Psychology as well. And I don't know if there are, continent type groups, but it's very important you also be part of your local groups as well. So for Australia, we used to have the Australian Society of Islamic Psychology, if you remember, in the early 2000s, and that kind of died out. And this is the part where I'm going to be controversial, if you allow me, because we entered the Australian Psychological Society Islam and Psychology Interest Group, but recently Muslim psychologists are not happy with the recent media release, about the current conflict in Palestine and Israel. So we're thinking about recreating the Australian Society of Islamic Psychology, so that we can actually collectively, Muslim psychologists, come together again, and so that we're not dictated by particular authority structures and groups. We build ourselves as Muslim psychologists, and I think that that's a good way. But then you've got let's give credit to local Muslim mental health organizations. You've got Mission of Hope, which I'm part of, but then you've got the Center for Muslim Wellbeing. You've got the Muslim mental health professionals in Melbourne as well. So you've got organizations who carry out and run Muslim mental health or Islamic psychology kind of areas. You've got the Sydney Muslim Mental Health Network, which is under the broader umbrella of the National Mental Health Professionals Network as well. But I think that we do need a dedicated group for Muslim psychologists. If I'm the vice president of the International Association, I think we need to have our own local chapter and reinvigorate it so that the senior seasoned individuals like ourselves need to get together and start regrouping and let the young people lead as well. So because we need to create a platform for them as well, hold their hand, because if you remember, Monique, no one held our hand. We were in that space supporting.
I just was thinking, Hanan, every organization you mentioned did not exist.
Yeah,
when
that's
we were
right.
first registered. It did not exist.
That's right.
And alhamdulillah, what a blessed position to be in, to see all of it now exist, and hopefully so much more. But I think the call to action is really important, to have other psychologists who, have come up after us, champion projects and organizations or networks to keep up and to facilitate these ongoing links between each other, so that we establish cooperative networks and share information for the advancement of our whole community.
That's right. And I think that whilst we've got the leadership, empowering young people who've got the energy and enthusiasm, it's not to say we don't, but as we grow and develop professionally, we have new goals, you know what I mean? So, giving them a step up, and given that, no one held our hands, I think that we need to hold their hands, and because, young people come with new, brilliant ideas, that we didn't think of, and it's not that we're out of touch with the younger generation, but they will be able to contribute in a way that we may not be aware of, so look out, everybody, inshallah, we will try and enhance and harness the Muslim psychologists in Australia, so that we can further better our community, in locally and also abroad as well, because we need more Muslim psychologists presenting at international conferences, because it's usually just me, you know what I mean? So they know Hanan Dover as the one presenting. I know we have a wealth of brilliant minds and practitioners, so, and if you turn, I always say this as a joke, but I mean it too, that if you turn the world map upside down, Australia's on top of the world. Do you know what I mean? So, so we have a lot to contribute internationally, and we're just further than everyone else, but still with the internet, there's a lot we can actually do and support one another and contribute, and continue this pioneering efforts in Islamic psychology.
Exactly right. Well, you have summarized that beautifully. Thank you very much, Jazakallah Khair, for making time in your very busy calendar. And who would have thought by the end of our interview you've come up with a few more ideas on your to-do list?
That's right, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Well, may Allah reward you for really sharing of yourself, and some of your best creations yet. I'm going to say yet, because you're surely not done yet.
Inshallah. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
You're very welcome. It's
been a pleasure catching up, and may Allah persist in giving us knowledge to do good for the community, inshallah.
Amen. Well, that's all I have to say for this episode of Be Well, where I've interviewed a very long-time friend of mine and really amazing colleague who invented another project called the Australian Muslim Achievement Awards, for which if she didn't invent it, she would have received many of them. Okay, that's all I've got to say. All right, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. See you again for the next episode of Be Well.